Alright, okay. This is another blog. Yes. And I have an essay due today at midnight, and it's already fucking noon. And I haven't fucking started it. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And integral to my essay is that I have to summarize and explain the theory behind the value neutral model in Barnes's essay. Not essay, it's an entire book, but this will be fun. I think Barnes is one of the more casual writers that we've encountered this semester. Other ones like Rousseau especially have been a maze, quite maze-like in terms of their writing. So it shouldn't be too difficult, but at the same time, this is like 30 pages worth of stuff. And I'm afraid for my vocal cords right now. I think they're already recoiling in preparation. But anyways, let's get this party started. Alright. Chapter 3. The value neutral model. And there's a introductory quote. Disability is not a brave struggle or courage in the face of adversity. Disability is an art. It's an ingenious way to live. And that is from Neil Marcus, 1992. Alright. Now, this is kind of a bit out of context because she does mention things from chapters 1 and 2. For my own sanity, I will not read chapters 1 and 2 because we are already on the 78th page of this book, and if I were to read all 3 chapters, I would be literally fucking dead. Alright? Okay. With that out of the way, I think the mere difference view of disability is correct. Having a disability is something that makes you different, but not something that it by itself makes you worse off because of that difference. Being disabled is simply something that makes you a minority. It is a way of having a minority body. Nevertheless, as anyone who is disabled can tell you, not everything about disability is a bed of roses. Moreover, I don't find it plausible that, as is sometimes asserted, all, or at least the most substantial, bad effects of disability are socially mediated. Sure, some of the bad effects of disability are caused by social attitudes and prejudices, but at least for many disabilities, there would be things about them that were difficult or unpleasant even in an ideal society. And while many people value and enjoy being disabled, not everyone values and enjoys being disabled. More strongly, I find it plausible that some people wouldn't like being disabled even in an ideal society, and I think that such preferences should be listened to and respected, not dismissed as implicitly ableist or obviously caused by social prejudice, just as the preferences of those who value disability should be listened to and respected. But I think all of this is compatible with the mere difference view of disability. The mere difference view isn't committed to the idea that disability is just a big grand party, nor to the idea that everyone would experience it as such if we could only eliminate social prejudice. So the goal of this chapter is to develop an account of disability that both counts as a mere difference view and accommodates the many-splendored, Janus-faced nature of disability. The account of disability I present here, what I call the value-neutral model, aims to show that disability is a neutral feature. I'll explain what I mean by neutral feature in subsequent discussions. But its being a neutral feature is compatible with its being, in a restricted sense, something that's bad for you. The same feature, I'll argue, that's bad for you with respect to some aspects of your life can be good for you with respect to other aspects of your life. That can mean you value the feature on the whole, but it doesn't make its bad effect any less real or any less bad. Crucially, though, I'll argue that this doesn't make disability unique among comparable social categories. Features such as, for example, sex and such sexual orientation can likewise be said to be mixed bags with respect to well-being. Section 3.1 Negative and positive effects on well-being. Let's start by defining some terminology. It's important to note that I'm simply stipulating how I'll be using this terminology for the purposes here, rather than trying to make claims about how such terminology should be understood in wider debates. Nothing in the area is uncontroversial, so I'm just going to make some terminological stipulations and proceed from there. If you don't like these particular definitions, though, I should note that nothing much hangs on defining them exactly as I've done here. I'm giving these definitions mostly for the sake of clarity, and like most definitions in philosophy, they're probably subject to funny counterexamples. You should be able to get the gist of the distinctions I'm interested in, even if you don't like the particular way I'm drawing the distinctions. In what follows, I am assuming that what is that symbol? Phi? I'll say phi. Phi has a negative effect on x's well-being, just in case the closest world, W, in which x lacks phi, is a world in which x has a higher level of well-being than x has in the actual world. X has a positive effect on x's well-being, just in case the closest world, W, in which x lacks phi, is a world in which x has a lower level of well-being than x in the actual world. Phi has a neutral effect on x's well-being, just in case the closest world, W, in which x lacks phi, is a world in which x's level of well-being is the same as the level of the well-being x has in the actual world. Phi is bad for x, just in case phi has a negative effect on x's well-being. Phi is good for x, just in case phi has a positive effect on x's well-being. Phi is indifferent for x, just in case phi has a neutral effect on x's well-being. Again, in defining good for and bad for in this way, I'm not attempting to make any substantial claims in value theory. I'm simply stipulating how I'm going to be using the phrases good for and bad for in this particular context. And the reason I'm using them in this way, in this particular context, is because it's a way that will help me clarify certain distinctions, as I hope will become clear in subsequent discussion. Section 3.2 Global bads and local bads. Some things are bad for you, on the whole, or all things considered. Other things are bad for you with respect to certain aspects of your life or with respect to certain times. I am assuming here that it makes sense to talk about both your well-being at a particular time and your well-being with respect to certain features, and the difference between these and your overall well-being, your well-being as a person across time. I will give examples of both in the discussion that follows, but I won't attempt to define them further. Let's call the distinction between the things that are bad for you on the whole and things that are bad for you only with respect to particular features or particular times, the distinction between global bads and local bads. I'll characterize the distinction as follows. Phi is locally bad for x if and only if phi has a negative effect on x's well-being with respect to some feature f or some time t. Phi is globally bad for x if and only if phi has a negative effect on x's overall well-being. Similarly, we can understand the distinction between local and global goods. Phi is locally good for x if and only if phi has a positive effect on x's well-being with respect to some feature x or some time t. Phi is globally good for x if and only if phi has a positive effect on x's overall well-being. Something that is a local bad needn't be a global bad, and vice versa for local and global goods. And we can easily see why. If phi is locally bad for you but globally good for you, that can simply be because, number one, or possibility one, phi is also locally good for you. Possibility two, the fact that phi is locally good for you makes it the case that the closest worlds in which you lack phi are worlds in which you have a lower level of well-being than you do in the actual world, even though you plausibly lack phi's local bad in this world. Crucially, the very same thing that is in some respects a local bad can also be, in other respects, a local good. My sister gets up at 6 a.m. almost every day to go running. This habit is a global good to her. It makes her fitter, less stressed, and happier. But there are definitely aspects of your life for which it's a local bad. She hates getting out of bed at 6 a.m. The first 5 minutes she's awake and the first 5 minutes of her run are always unpleasant. She gets rather nasty blisters. Her running habit incurs local bads, but it's a global good. And that's because the very same thing, getting up early to go running, that is a local bad with respect to some features of her life, is a local good with respect to others, in such a way that the local goods outweigh the local bads. Local bads can be understood as local to a particular feature or local to a particular time. My sister has chronically sore feet because of her running. That's a bad that's local to a particular feature, her feet, but not to a particular time. Her feet are pretty much always sore. My sister is always epically miserable for the first 5 minutes she is awake in the morning. That is local to a particular time, when the misery passes quickly once she wakes up a bit, but it's less easily localized to a particular feature. By all accounts, her entire conscious experience is one of abject misery. She's not really a morning person. We often trade local bads in either sense for global goods. Similarly, something can be a global bad while still being a local good. No kid likes getting the flu. When given the choice, most any kid would prefer not getting the flu to getting the flu. But when you get the flu, you don't have to go to school. Not going to school is great. It's the one good thing about getting the flu. Even though on the whole, getting the flu makes things go worse for you, it's a global bad, it does have one salient local good, in that it lets you stay home from school. Even if you happily trade staying home from school to get rid of the fever, aches, chills, nausea, etc., staying home from school is still, in its own right, a local good. The child's flu is a global bad because the local bads outweigh the local goods. Staying home from school is great, but it is not worth feeling so miserable. My sister's running is a global good because the local goods outweigh the local bads. Sore feet are unpleasant, but they're worth it for the fitness and stress relief she gets from running. The point here is an utterly simple one. Things can have good effects even if they are all things considered bad for you, and things can have bad effects even if they are all things considered good for you. We are going great. Okay. Section 3.3, Instrumental and Non-Instrumental Value. Sometimes people give surprising testimony about what they count as a global good. They never realized what truly mattered in their life until they got cancer. They had a terrible work-life balance until a painful divorce showed them that something bad had to change. They were never really willing to stand up for themselves and demand to be treated with respect until they were bullied, and so on. But there's an important difference between a cancer survivor with a new perspective on life and my sister, the early morning runner. My sister values running for instrumental reasons. She likes that it keeps her fit and relieves stress, but she also enjoys running for her own sake. That is, she values her experience of running each morning, in addition to valuing the indirect benefits she gets from running each morning. That doesn't mean she values everything about the experience of running, of course. She hates the first half mile, she doesn't like sore feet or blistered heels, she's not a big fan of sweating. But on the whole, she enjoys running, in addition to enjoying the good effects like fitness and stress relief of running. In contrast, the newly wise cancer patient doesn't, I'd assume, enjoy having cancer. She doesn't value her experience of having cancer for its own sake. She may value changes in her life that have been caused, at least in part, by her having cancer. She may even think that those changes perhaps couldn't, have come about unless she had been faced with a potentially terminal illness. But the cancer and the epiphany are, at least in principle, separable. She can imagine reaping the benefits without having had cancer. And if she could get the benefits without the cancer, that would be great. My sister can't imagine getting all the benefits of running without the running itself. And that's because part of what she values is the running itself. She values her experience of running directly, not just the independent goods that running has brought her. She values running in a way that the cancer patient doesn't value cancer. Here's what my sister and the grateful cancer survivor have in common. They are both such that they value their experiences, the running and the cancer, respectively, but my sister values running for both instrumental and non-instrumental reasons, while the cancer survivor values cancer only for instrumental reasons. For the purposes here, we need a finer grained distinction that's simply the good for bad for X distinction that I've employed above. Plausibly, something might be good for X in the sense of good for that I'm using, despite being something that's bad or negative simplistic. Getting cancer might be something might be something bad or negative simplistic, even if it is on the whole good for the grateful cancer survivor. In the next section, I'll attempt to outline such a finer grained distinction. There are, of course, those who won't be moved by these considerations because they're skeptical about the distinction between instrumental and non-instrumental value, or perhaps skeptical that we non-instrumentally value anything other than pleasure or happiness. It's worth noting, though, that if you're a skeptic about the instrumental-non-instrumental distinction, the case for a mere difference view of disability is much easier to make, simply because one obvious objection, oh sure, people value being disabled, but they only value it instrumentally, isn't available. In allowing for the instrumental-non-instrumental distinction, I'm intentionally making things more difficult for myself. Whether or not it's well-motivated, the instrumental-non-instrumental distinction is important for some, especially objectivist theories of well-being, and part of what I want to show is that my account of disability is fully compatible with these stronger theories of well-being. In theories of well-being where the instrumental-non-instrumental distinction is unimportant, or where the only non-instrumental value is pleasure, my account and mere difference views more generally are much easier to motivate. I discuss these issues in more detail in sections 3.11 and 3.12. There are 12 sections, my god. Section 3.4, good, bad, and neutral simplistic. Some things are good simplistic with respect to well-being. These things enrich your life. You'd be missing something if you didn't have them. Other things are bad simplistic with respect to well-being. They detract from your life. They make your life worse. And yet many more things are neutral simplistic with respect to well-being. Their presence doesn't by itself make you better or worse off than people without such things. But, as I hope the above discussion has illustrated, net effect on well-being isn't sufficient to capture the difference between things that are good, bad, or neutral simplistic. Perhaps there may be some things that always or nearly always have a net positive effect on well-being, are always good for you in the sense laid out in section 3.1. Similarly, there might be things that always or almost always have a net negative effect on well-being, no matter the circumstance. But I take it that such things, if they exist at all, are rare, and that they don't exhaust what we'd like to categorize as good, bad, or neutral simplistic. To make that characterization, we need to go beyond net effect on well-being. And that's simply because sometimes something that is itself bad can have an overall or all things considered positive effect on well-being. And likewise, mutatis mutandis, some things that are themselves good can have an overall negative effect on well-being. Maybe getting cancer is bad simplistic. Maybe going through a bitter divorce is bad simplistic. But we can imagine circumstances in which, on the whole, your life goes better for you because of such experiences. Things that seem paradigmatically negative, like cancer, can sometimes have an overall positive effect on well-being, be a global good, in the terminology of section 3.2. That doesn't mean the experiences are themselves good or valuable. It just means that sometimes bad things can have good consequences, such that overall the good effects outweigh the bad. In contrast, many, perhaps most, traits are neutral with respect to well-being. They are not by themselves good or bad simplistic, insofar as you aren't missing anything if you lack them or worse off in virtue of having them. But such traits can still, of course, make your life go better or worse for you, depending on what they're combined with. Having red hair is neutral with respect to well-being. Having red hair is not by itself good or bad. It does not by itself make your life go better or worse for you. But having red hair in a society with strong anti-ginger prejudice may well make your life go worse for you. In this case though, it's not having red hair simplistic that makes that your life go worse for you. It's having red hair in context of anti-ginger prejudice. This is a case in which a neutral feature combined with something extrinsic social prejudice makes a negative net effect on well-being. Being naturally inflexible is neutral with respect to well-being. Being naturally inflexible does not by itself make your life go better or worse for you, but it might well make your life go worse for you if your greatest dream has always been to be a ballet dancer. Again, though, in this case, it's not being inflexible simplistic that's bad for you. It's being inflexible in combination with a desire to be a ballet dancer. So this time in combination with something intrinsic that makes your life go worse for you. But of course, both of the above traits, although they can be bad for you, can also be good for you. In the wildlings culture described by George R.R. Martin in this A Song for Ice and Fire series, having red hair is considered a sign of luck and courage. Red-headed people are kissed by fire. In such a culture, having red hair can easily make your life go better for you, as those with red hair are singled out for special privileges and generally looked up to. Likewise, being naturally inflexible may be bad for you if you want to be a ballet dancer, but it could be good for you if you instead want to be a distance runner. There's a lot of evidence suggesting that those who are naturally less flexible have better running economy. According to the sense of good force stipulated in section 3.1, phi is good for X just in case the presence of phi increases X's well-being. That is, the closest possible world in which X lacks phi are worlds in which X has a lower level of well-being than X has in the actual world. Likewise, phi is bad for X just in case the presence of phi decreases X's well-being. The point above is simply this. Some trait phi, which is itself neutral with respect to well-being, can be nevertheless good or bad for X. If flexibility is itself neutral, but it can be bad for X, but it can be bad for the would-be dancer, good for the would-be distance runner. Whether phi is good or bad for X is not merely a function of whether phi is in itself good or bad simplistic with respect to well-being. Whether phi is good or bad for X is also, in large part, a matter of what else, both intrinsic and extrinsic, it is combined with. Again, what this emphasizes is that we need some way of getting at the distinction between good, bad, and neutral simplistic traits other than the overall causal effect that they have on well-being. So here's what I propose. Phi is good simplistic just in case for any person X who has phi, X has a higher level of well-being in virtue of having phi than they would have had they lacked phi. Phi is bad simplistic just in case for any person X who has phi, X has a lower level of well-being in virtue of having phi than they would have had if they lacked phi. Phi is neutral simplistic just in case phi is neither bad simplistic nor good simplistic. Perhaps having people that love you, can't relate. Having fulfilling projects, can't relate. Or being kind, can't relate. Are good simplistic. Your life goes better in virtue of including those kinds of things, and would go worse in virtue of lacking them. That needn't mean, however, that such features always lead to a net increase in well-being. There can be strange circumstances in which such features are bad for, as described in section 3.1, particular individuals. Likewise, perhaps experiences like going through a bitter divorce, being bullied, or having cancer are bad simplistic. Your life goes worse in virtue of these experiences and would have gone better in virtue of lacking them. But, as discussed, this doesn't mean that their presence leads to a net decrease in well-being. Sometimes things that are themselves bad can lead to a net increase in well-being. For example, you reevaluate your priorities and have a renewed sense of determination to achieve your goals after surviving cancer. You finally learn to stand up for yourself after being bullied, etc. The thought here is that if something is bad simplistic, your life goes worse in virtue of it specifically, even if its overall causal effects on your well-being ultimately make you better off. Even if you end up learning how to stand up for yourself after being bullied, you aren't better off in virtue of being bullied. Being bullied is just the cause of some other thing, a greater sense of strength or self-esteem perhaps, and that other thing is something that makes you better off. And likewise, mutantis mutandis for things that are good simplistic. Perhaps you're always better off in virtue of having fulfilling projects or being happy, even if there are cases in which the overall net effect on your well-being of such features can be negative. Having red hair, in contrast, is neutral simplistic. Your life doesn't go better or worse in virtue of your hair being any particular color, but that's compatible with having red hair being good for you or bad for you. Having red hair can be a positive or negative effect on well-being, depending on what it's combined with, even though it's a neutral feature. Notice, though, the way I'm using good to simplistic and bad simplistic is very strong, such that many things we often think of as good don't turn out to be good simplistic, and are instead neutral simplistic. Take, for example, having children. I take parents at their word when they tell me that having children is something wonderful, enriching, special, etc. But as someone who is happily child free, I don't think my life is missing anything simply because I don't have kids. Having kids could be great. If you want them, you can have if you have full reproductive choice in whether or not to have them, if you have the resources to support them, etc. That is, having kids can be great in the right circumstances, but not having kids can be great, equally, differently great too. Again, there will be those skeptical that there is any such distinction between the good, bad, and neutral simpliciter. There's just the effect that things have on well-being, and that's it. But again, such skeptics should be far less resistant to a mere difference view of disability in the first place. What my characterization of disability aims to show is that even granting a lot of strong assumptions of the sort often favored by objectivists, we can give a plausible account of disability as mere difference. Section 3.5, which takes up the next 10 pages. Ooh. Man. I'll take a quick break. Mutatis mutandis. Mutatis mutandis. Oh, man. Oh boy, I already got a match. Cool. Alright, let's get back to it. Section 3.5, the value neutral model. With these distinctions in place, I can now present my view of disability, which I'm calling the value neutral model. Disability is neutral simpliciter. It can sometimes be bad for you, depending on what intrinsic or extrinsic factors it is combined with, but it can also, in different combinations, be good for you. And all of that is compatible with disability sometimes, perhaps always being locally bad for you. That is, bad for you with respect to particular things or particular times. The specifics of this view will depend on your favorite theory of well-being. I'll explore a few options for how the details can be spelled out in sections 3.10 to 3.12. But what I want to focus on in the following sections is an epistemic argument. My claim is that we have good evidence, whatever our particular commitments about well-being, to think that something like the value-neutral model is true. To begin with, consider gayness instead of disability. As I've defined it, I expect most people would agree that being gay is neutral simpliciter, as is being straight. You aren't better off simply in virtue of being gay, but neither are you worse off. Being gay does, however, make many people's lives go worse for them because of what it is combined with, most saliently, social prejudice and discrimination against gay people. Even in the face of homophobia, however, there are many gay people whose lives go better, or at least not worse for them, because they are gay. There are unique, valuable aspects to their experience of gayness that mean a great deal to them, which enrich their lives and which they would not trade for the somewhat easier life of your average straight person. Given the social context, however, I doubt there are any gay people for whom gayness is not bad for them, in some respect or other. No matter how much you value your overall experience of being gay, it's still bad to be discriminated against. It was still bad to be bullied in high school. It's still bad to be cautious about when and where you can enjoy even the mildest published displays of affection with a partner, etc. But the very same feature that is bad for you with respect to some features or sometimes, that is a local bad, can also be good for you with respect to other features or other times, that is a local good. Such that on the whole it is good for you, that is a global good. Being gay can be a global good, but I suspect that in today's social context it is always or nearly always also a local bad. Importantly though, the pattern of interaction between being gay and well-being does not depend entirely on social attitudes towards gayness, although it is obviously heavily influenced by them. Even if we lived in a society free of homophobia, there might still be local bads associated with being gay. And more strongly, there might still be people for whom being gay was globally bad for them. If you are gay, and you and your partner are cis, you cannot biologically reproduce with your partner. Even in an idealized society, there might be gay people who have a deep, long-standing desire to have the biological child of their partner. For such a person, depending on how profound that desire is, it might be the case that being gay is bad for them, even though being gay is not itself negative. And even the desire to biologically reproduce with their partner was, and even if the desire to biologically reproduce with their partner was not strong enough to make the case that being gay was globally bad for them, it could still be bad for them qua person who desires to biologically reproduce with their partner. That is, being gay could still be a local bad, even if it was not a global bad, if for reasons independent of social prejudice or stigma. Likewise, for having biological features associated with male sex, for many people, having such features is an advantage. It's something that marks you out for social privilege, given the way society currently works. But for some people, having these characteristics is a definite disadvantage. Some trans women, for example, are women who have biological features associated with the male sex. As a result, these women often undergo years of social stigma, persecution, and in some cases, medical treatment. It's plausible that having male-associated sex characteristics is bad for some, not all, but some trans women, even though it is not bad simpliciter. Moreover, having male-associated sex characteristics could plausibly still be bad for some trans women, even in a society free of transphobia. So, for example, some people could desire very deeply not to have these particular sex characteristics, and also desire not to undergo the hassle of any procedures to alter them. Male-associated sex characteristics could be bad for such a person, even though they are neutral simpliciter. More generally, being male can be bad for some people independently of how society views maleness, and despite the fact that being male is neutral simpliciter. Suppose someone with male sex organs had a deep desire to be pregnant, give birth, and breastfeed, as some males do. Damn, they know me so well. Regardless of social attitudes, being male might be bad for them, even though it is not bad simpliciter. Similarly, even if their life was such that being male was not a global bad, their desire to be pregnant could still be enough, again, regardless of social context, to make it a local bad. What I'm going to argue throughout the rest of this chapter is that the testimony of disabled people gives us good reason to think that disability functions like gayness and maleness with respect to well-being. It is, by itself, neutral, but it can be a global good or a global bad, depending on what else, internal or external, it is combined with. And circumstances in which it is a global good or globally indifferent can, of course, still be ones in which it is a local bad. As we've already discussed, disabled people frequently self-report good quality of life. But such reports are, of course, consistent with disability being bad simpliciter and merely offset by other goods. And this is the narrative of disability that we're most familiar with. The positive effects of disability have to do with overcoming disability. But many disabled people reject this narrative of disability and describe their own experiences in ways that support the view that disability is neutral. I'll discuss a few examples below, but readers should note that other representative examples of disability positive testimony are interspersed throughout this book. To begin with a historical example, Dostoevsky dealt with severe epilepsy his entire adult life. The unpredictability and intensity of his seizures was a great difficulty for him. And yet, here's what he had to say about his experience of epileptic seizures. For several instants, I experience a happiness that is impossible in an ordinary state, and of which other people have no conception. I feel full harmony in myself and in the whole world, and the feeling is so strong and sweet that for a few seconds of such bliss, one could give up 10 years of life, perhaps all of life. I felt that heaven descended to earth and swallowed me. I really attained God and was imbued with Him. All of you healthy people don't even suspect what happiness is, the happiness that we epileptics experience for a second before an attack. Dostoevsky's epilepsy was doubtless a local bad for him in many respects. But his experience of epilepsy was such that he describes it as being a global good, not the least because it had a profound impact on his writing. Nor is there any sense in which Dostoevsky's epilepsy was a global good only because of what non-disability related things it caused, or only because he was able to overcome it. That's not to say that Dostoevsky's experience is representative. Disability is certainly, given the actual circumstances, a global bad for many disabled people. That is, many disabled people are such that the nearest possible world where they lack their disability, that they are better off. But of course, we can't infer that a trait that is often a global bad in its current social context would often be a global bad in different, better social contexts. More importantly, though, many disabled people claim that disability is not bad for them, even in their actual present circumstances. For some, this claim is similar to that of the grateful cancer survivor. They claim their lives have, on the whole, gone better because of disability, but they do not value their experience of disability itself. Perhaps disability has taught them value lessons in perseverance, perhaps it has made them stronger, etc. But others claim to value their experience of disability itself and strongly reject narratives of overcoming disability. It's not just that disability happened to have some nice consequences which they valued enough to not mind the disability, but rather that being disabled itself is something valuable. The idea is the bedrock of the disability pride movement. So, for example, here's writer Sarah Eyre describing her experience of MS in her essay, A Few Awesome Things About Being Disabled, from 2012. I have all these tiny strange bits of joy. There are all these unexpected lovely things that are awesome about being me, Sarah who has MS. They are, well now were, secret, and they only come with a specific life, my life as a disabled person. They are mine, and they are wonderful, and I can't imagine not having them. Look, I'm not going to talk about parking. Yes, I have a parking placard, and it isn't awesome exactly. It's more just something I need to use. What is awesome, though, although it might not sound that way at first, is having a lesion in my brainstem that makes me hear music that isn't there. Once my neurologist confirmed that auditory hallucinations were normal for my condition and that I wasn't actually losing my grip on reality, I started to really enjoy them. The music itself is haunting and distant, like listening to a song being played in the house next door. Maybe. Something familiar that I can almost make out, but I can't quite hear it clearly. I can spend an hour just lying on my bed listening. It's beautiful. It isn't always there, but when it is there, it's as though I have my own personal soundtrack, and I love it. Also awesome, euphoria. For as long as I can remember, I had these sudden surges of random joy, moments where everything seemed 100 times more beautiful than it had 5 minutes before. Moments when I am quietly but fully in love with the world. This isn't mania. I don't do anything in these moments or make any life-changing decisions. The actual scientific term for it is euphoria, and it's pretty great. Similarly, here's an excerpt from playwright Neil Marcus's Storm reading. Marcus has generalized dystonia, which he prefers to call flourishing dystonia. For years, I've been under the medical microscope. I've been called twisted, paralyzed, tortured, afflicted, horribly disabled, disfigured, unintelligible, and confined to a wheelchair. No one asked me what I thought. Now it's time for the world to hear my story in my terms. Another actor begins to read. Playwright Neil Marcus has flourishing dystonia. a neurological condition which allows him to leap and soar and twist and turn constantly in public, which, thus challenging stereotypes of every sort and making him very interesting to watch and sit next to during lunch hour. It rides him like a roller coaster at times. Again, such positive experiences are by no means universal. Many disabled people are worse off as a result of being disabled. Though again, it's important to again emphasize that non-disabled people tend to wildly overestimate the negative effects of disability on at least perceived well-being. Yet, as the disability rights community is quick to point out, they are made worse off by disability in a social context laden with prejudice and stigma against the disabled. It is no wonder, the thought goes, that people suffer from disabilities when they routinely face barriers to access and accommodation, when they are pitied and marginalized, when they are constantly told that to be disabled is to endure a great misfortune. I'll discuss the connection between the stigmatization of disability and positive views of disability more in Chapter 6. We should be no more puzzled that disabled people in today's society are often made worse off by their disabilities than we are that gay people in 1950s were often made worse off by their sexuality. But here we come to the great point of resistance. While most readers will, I hope, agree that society is in many ways prejudiced against the disabled, it nevertheless seems to many that being disabled is bad in a way that's independent of such prejudice. Some popular mere difference views of disability, most notably some versions of the social model of disability, ascribe all the bad effects of disability to social prejudice. Indeed, on at least some readings of the social model, disability itself entirely consists in social prejudice. But this strikes many as incredible. If you are deaf, you cannot enjoy the auditory experience of music. No amount of social change will alter that. The auditory experience of music is a good thing, so there are good things that you will miss out on if you are deaf, even in an idealized society. Likewise, if you are blind, you cannot visually experience artwork or the faces of your loved ones. No amount of social change will alter that. Visually experiencing artwork or the faces of your loved ones are good things. So there are good things you will miss out on, even if you are blind, even if you are in an ideal society. The crucial point of the value-neutral model of disability is that, unlike some other versions of the mere difference view, it can allow for this. Yes, it's a good thing to be able to visually appreciate the faces of your loved ones, and yes, you miss out on that if you're blind, and yes, no amount of social change will alter that fact. But it simply doesn't follow from that blindness is something bad. Missing out on all the visual appreciation of loved ones' faces may well be a local bad. That is, a blind person, even in an ideal society, may be worse off qua person who would like to visually appreciate the face of their loved ones. I say may here because I'm reluctant to say that features like this are always or automatically even local bads. The non-blind among us are, of course, inclined to evaluate the visual appreciation of our loved ones' faces highly, and I think that it would be a great loss not to have that ability. But I worry about the inference from this ability is something we value, or this ability is something good, to those without disability are worse off, at least with respect to that ability. Ostensibly, many women who elect to have children value their ability to do so highly, and when it comes to abilities, gestating new life in your own body surely ranks among the impressive and profound. We don't think that those who lack this ability are automatically worse off, even if we think that the ability itself is valuable, good, whatever. We're not inclined to say that the lack of this ability is automatically even a local bad for most people who are male, for example, or I would hope for the female who both cannot become pregnant and has no desire to do so. Lacking disability may well be a local bad for some, but not for all. I worry that our inclination to think that lack of abilities has to do with vision, hearing, mobility, etc. would always be at least a local bad has more to do with norms and normalcy. More than half the population lacks the ability to get pregnant and yet seems to be doing just fine. We're every day greeted with examples of people who don't seem in any way worse off for lacking that ability. That is, they're not even worse off with respect to that ability, and lacking that ability seems perfectly normal. Whereas lacking the ability to see, hear, to walk, etc., that's something we see as entirely abnormal, and we're much less comfortable with the idea that people could possibly lack such abilities and not be worse off as a result. Yet it is not clear why this is the case. We're perfectly happy with the idea that an ability can be valuable without those that lack it being thereby worse off in any way. Likewise, we're perfectly happy with the idea that an experience, becoming a parent, getting married, etc., can be valuable without those who don't have such experiences thereby being worse off in any way. But suppose, for the sake of argument, that not being able to visually appreciate the faces of your loved ones is always a local bad, and perhaps even bad simpliciter. It doesn't follow that being bad is bad simpliciter. I mean, that being blind is bad simpliciter, or bad for those who are blind. And that's because the very same thing, blindness, that's local bad with respect to your ability to visually appreciate the faces of your loved ones, can also be a local good for you with respect to other things you care about. For example, storyteller and activist Kim Kilpatrick talks a lot in her online journal, Great Things About Being Blind, about her inability to stereotype or judge people based on how they look and their complete lack of self-consciousness or vanity about her visual appearance, two things she values highly and which are part of her experience of blindness. And then, of course, there is the body of empirical research demonstrating the sensory uniqueness of the congenitally blind. Blindness can be bad for you with respect to such features, but good for you with respect to other features, such that on the whole, blindness isn't bad for you. It's worth being very clear about what is being said here. I'm not endorsing what I call the X-Men view of disability. The local bads of disability are compensated for by special enhanced abilities that are had only by the disabled. Unless we adopt a very fine-grained notion of the abilities, the account I'm offering is saying something much more subtle than that. Disability can offer unique, valuable experiences, things that count as local goods, without producing things we'd usually classify as extra abilities. Disability can make it, as in Kim Kilpatrick's case, harder to feel certain kinds of self-consciousness or engage in certain types of prejudice. Disability can offer a sense of liberation from cultural norms about how your body should look or behave. Disability can help you develop an appreciation for a different pace of life or give you a new and different aesthetic appreciation for the varieties in the human body. Many disabled people even find great value in some of the things non-disabled people assume are the worst aspects of disability, including, as Eva Kittay has discussed at length, dependence on others. The potential goods of disability are by no means limited to extra disability-specific abilities. This is not the X-Men view. Yes, sometimes disabilities do come with specific abilities, ones that we tend to overlook. But disability can also be, as Rosemary Galland Thompson put it, an epistemic resource and a narrative resource. It can expand the scope of what we know and what we can experience, in ways that disabled people often find very valuable. Of course, even in an ideal society, there might be people such that blindness is bad for them, depending on an individual's hopes, dreams, desires, and plans. Being blind might be globally bad for them, even in a society without ableism. Just as, for similar reasons, being gay could still be globally bad for someone in a world without homophobia, and being male could still be bad for someone in a world without sex-related prejudice. But being blind can be bad for some individuals without being bad simpliciter. The fact that it is sometimes bad for some individuals doesn't license the conclusion that it is bad simpliciter. And cutting against the idea that disability is bad simpliciter is the simple fact that many people value their experience of disability. It's something that means a lot to them, something they celebrate. The question, of course, is whether they are making some sort of mistake in doing so. Is the disability positive person more like the marshal at the gay pride parade, or more like the battered woman who values her abusive relationship? I will address this question in detail in Chapter 4, examining the argument that the first-person testimony of disabled people who claim to value being disabled can be dismissed as a type of adaptive preference. But the basic position I want to defend here is this. The burden of proof is on the person who wants to say that valuing disability is unlike valuing gayness. Both are instances of a person valuing and celebrating their membership in a particular social category. In the absence of compelling argument that is somehow mistaken for disabled people to value disability in this way, that is, valuing disability and valuing gayness are importantly different, we should assume that these cases are on a par. I'm going to assume, for the sake of argument, what follows, that these cases are in fact analogous, and that there is nothing abhorrent about valuing disability. I'll then defend that assumption in subsequent chapters. Let's return now to the case of blindness. Even in an ableism-free society, being blind might still constitute a local bad, and for some people, being blind might also constitute a global bad. Being blind might be bad for them, but there are others who don't, even in our own ableism-ridden society, feel the same way. While blindness is almost invariably a local bad, many blind people report that it is not a global bad. In fact, they suggest that they value their experience of blindness, just as those of us who are sighted value our experience of being sighted. That is, this, for example, is what writer and activist Rebecca Atkinson, who lost her sight gradually as an adult, had to say when she was presented with a potential cure for her blindness and found herself conflicted about whether to take it. If this experiment of going blind has taught me anything, it's that what you lose in one place, you gain elsewhere. And while blind life is different from a sighted life, it is not lesser. And we see this pattern replicated across a wide range of disabilities. Yes, they can be and often are local bads. Yes, for many people they are global bads. Yes, they could be global bads even in the absence of ableism. They could be bad for some people even in the absence of ableism. But that doesn't mean they are bad simpliciter. Even in our actual ableist society, many disabled people report that their disabilities are not global bad. And more strongly, even in our actual ableist society, many disabled people report that they value their experience of disability non-instrumentally. As Tom Shakespeare writes, the celebration of disability pride is the celebration of difference and the acceptance of difference. It is about subverting negative valuation and reclaiming disability. Disability thus displays the pattern of a neutral feature. It may be good for you, it may be bad for you, it may be utterly indifferent for you, depending on what it is combined with. But disability, at least if we take testimony of many disabled people at face value, isn't itself something that's bad. It is, like many other minority features, neutral with respect to well-being. I wish I had water. I'm gonna take a break. I just found myself going quicker and quicker and quicker as I was reading this, because I think my throat was like, dude, you're actively hurting yourself, like, big time by doing this. That hurt big time. Oh my god. I always think back to that Germa moment when he got nuked on live TV. Oh my god. I should be a bit conscious about how long I spend on this break, since the camera is rolling, so the longer break means more chance that the recording will just like futz out and say like, yo, you got low storage or something. Because you know that often happens. My neck has been killing me these past few days because I think wow, that actually worked. It's just the mere fact that like I'm looking down whenever I like have to read, or like whenever I have to do a computer. I don't have a proper desk. I think that might be my killer. Man, I'm getting matches of all kinds right now. And I think a big part of this is that I keep on bringing my leg up for some reason. Like, I seem to like having my leg up, but that just makes neck problems so much worse. I think it's the chair I'm sitting on. Or maybe I'm blaming things external to myself too much. Maybe there's a fundamental problem of myself, you know? That's always a possibility. One more match, just one more, please. Okay. Let's get back to it. How many pages? 118 to 20 pages. Oh my god. Yo, I might just not do this anymore. Okay. Oh, put your knee down. Put your knee down. You say it's bad, and in the very next second you do it. What the hell, man? Man. Some parts of me just never learn. Okay. Section 3.6. The value neutral model as mere difference. I've presented the value neutral model as a type of mere difference view on disability. What I'll argue in this section is that the same things that support the value neutral model itself, namely the testimony of disabled people and the particular social context in which that testimony occurs, also support the rejection of bad difference claims about disability. Clearly, according to the value neutral model, disability is not an automatically or intrinsic cost to well-being, but things get more complicated with some of the more nuanced versions of the bad difference view. Recall point 2. Were society fully accepting of disabled people, it would still be the case that for any given disabled person X and any arbitrary non-disabled person Y, such that X and Y are in relatively similar personal and social economic conditions, it is likely that X has a lower level of well-being than Y in virtue of Y's disability. That is the bad difference view. Perhaps, one might argue, the disseminated positive testimony of disabled people doesn't give us reason to reject the bad difference view like point 2, even if it gives us reason to think that disability is neutral, simplistic, and sometimes a global good. That could all be compatible with disability being strongly counterfactually correlated with reduction in well-being. Those who experience disability as something positive could be curious outliers, cases that are interesting anomalies, but not ones that undermine a bad difference view. Despite the fact that disabled and non-disabled people report similar levels of happiness and life satisfaction, there might still be good reason to think that in our actual present circumstances, disability is at least likely to make people worse off. Disabled people are substantially more likely to be unemployed, poor, victims of abuse and hate crimes, etc. That doesn't mean, of course, that in the actual circumstances we should think an arbitrary disabled person is likely to have a lower level of well-being than a non-disabled person in relatively similar social economic circumstances. But let's grant, for the sake of argument, that we should. It still wouldn't give us any reason to endorse point 2. For that, we need good reason to think that people are likely to be worse off in virtue of being disabled in all closest worlds in which disabled people aren't disadvantaged by social prejudice. It's important to note that such a world is radically different from the world we actually inhabit, which will limit what we say about it. Recall hashtag point 2, which, as you perhaps don't remember, is just point 2 without the in virtue of. Unlike point 2, which I think is false, I think we should be agnostic about hashtag point 2. To have reason to accept or reject hashtag point 2, we need to have good reason to believe that the overall distribution of well-being in a fairly distant possibility is some particular way. And I don't see how we could get evidence for that kind of claim. Consider, analogously, the case of ZIGs. For all I know, in the nearest world free of ZIGs-based prejudice, those who are female are somewhat more likely to have a higher level of well-being than those who are male. But equally, for all I know in such a world, those who are male are the ones more likely to have a higher level of well-being. The two key points here are these. I am in no position, given my current epistemic state, inhabiting as I do a world so imbued with sex-based prejudice, to make a judgment about what, if any, difference there would be between the well-being of males and females in such a world. Counterfactual judgments are tricky at the best of times. They seem close to impossible in a case like this. And more to the point, if I were in a position to make such a judgment, it doesn't seem that facts of this kind are particularly significant. If the well-being oracle told me that in the closest possible world that is free of sex-based prejudice, it just so happens that an arbitrary female is likely to have a slightly higher level of well-being than an arbitrary male in similar circumstances, that doesn't by itself support a bad difference view of the male sex. There could be all sorts of accidental reasons for why distributional facts about well-being, for why such distributional facts about well-being obtained. For why such distributional facts about well-being obtained. That sentence is weird. Okay. This just further shows why something like Pound 2 is too weak to serve as a sufficient condition for a bad difference view of disability. So let's return our focus to point 2. Unlike hashtag point 2, where I think we should be agnostic, I think the same considerations that support the value-neutral model should lead us to think that point 2 is false. Even in our actual very non-ideal world, disabled people routinely report high levels of life satisfaction, and it is increasingly common, especially within the burgeoning disability pride movement, for disabled people to say that their disabilities are something they value and would not change about themselves. Moreover, there is substantial evidence that social factors like family support, social integration, and accessible employment are more strongly correlated in the severity of disability to at least perceived well-being in disabled people. More on this in section 3.7. Given all this evidence is available to us, even in the context in which disabled people face substantial prejudice and stigma, I suggest we have good reason to think that Pound 2 is false. That's not, of course, to deny that even in a world without ableism, disability could sometimes be bad for an individual, and likewise sometimes be good for an individual. What I'm arguing is that whether a disability is bad or good or indifferent for you depends on what else it is combined with. Some personalities, some plans, some hopes and dreams, etc., will be frustrated by disability. Others will be aided and enriched. Give me a second. I just saw the cleanest match I've ever seen, and it just bugs me that I didn't realize it until just now. Wow. Okay. All right, get back on it. Others will be aided and enriched. If you have a deep desire to be a ballet dancer, but you don't have good feet, for example, your arches are too flat, your feet are too wide, etc., then your foot shape can reasonably be said to be bad for you. But your life doesn't go worse for you simply in virtue of your foot shape. Your foot shape is part of the explanation, but it is certainly not the whole explanation. Things go badly for you because of a combination of things: an entrenched desire to be a ballet dancer, norms about how ballet dancers' feet should look, and the shape of your feet. It is, at most, partly in virtue of your foot shape that things go badly for you. Conversely, if you are lonely or bitter, your life is worse for you in virtue of being lonely or bitter. The position of the value-neutral model is that having a disability is more like foot shape in a ballet dancer than it is like being lonely. For similar reasons, motivations for accepting the value-neutral model are also motivations for rejecting point 3. For any arbitrary disabled person X, if you could hold X's position, personal and social economic conditions fixed but remove their disability, you would thereby improve their well-being. Disability positive testimony, unless we adopt wholesale skepticism about it, gives us good evidence that removing someone's disability, provided you can hold fixed other circumstances, doesn't thereby make that person better off. It would make some people better off, it would make some people worse off, and for some it would have little impact whatsoever. Finally, the same sort of considerations apply to point 4. Consider two possible worlds, W and W star, which are relevantly similar to the actual world, except that W contains no ableism, and W star contains both no ableism and no disabled people. The overall level of well-being in W star is higher than the overall level of well-being in W, in virtue of the fact that W star contains no disabled people. Whatever the comparative facts about overall well-being between such worlds might be, and as per the discussion of point 2, I'm skeptical that we are in any sort of position to make judgments about that. The complex range of evidence we have about people's actual experiences of disability makes point 4 implausible. I will take a fucking break. I do not conceive of my throat being able to sustain 20, a bit less than 20, like 18 more pages of continuous reading. I just find that to be impossible, given my voice. I have, however, made wonderful progress on the puzzle. And I will see you guys later, I believe. See, I'm becoming Markiplier.